Hi, everybody. I'm Akshay from Terminal 49, and I have a new guest today from our team, Dom. Welcome.
Awesome to be here. This is a lot of fun.
Give me a little bit of background on yourself.
Yeah, so I've been with Terminal 49 for just a little over 2 years now. Come from a small tech startup background, and now I do sales. So everything from small, 100 container a month companies all the way up to the largest enterprises.
And before you joined Terminal 49, you were also like in a kind of a construction software company, right?
I did two construction software companies back to back.
So yeah, you kind of like this bits to atom is a theme over here for you.
I had never heard that phrase until I joined Terminal 49, but I like to call it, you know, software for people whose companies move things or do things in the physical world.
Yeah, that's a better way to say it. All right. We wanted to talk about you talk to a lot of prospects and customers that are integrated into different systems, right? And one thing that I've been hearing from you is a lot of cargo owners, importers, exporters that use Microsoft Dynamics 365, Power BI, and they come to us. They want to integrate the Terminal 49's container visibility milestones from carriers and terminals and rail into Dynamics. Why do you think that's happening? And tell me about what you're seeing in the market.
I think the way that this has come about is companies are scaling out of NetSuite and they're not ready for SAP, and the mid market, which is, I'll say, 50 million to somewhere between a quarter billion or $500 million in revenue, is dominated by Microsoft Dynamics. And they have a lot of great tooling for companies that size, and their whole ecosystem is amazing, but they're they have no inputs, right? It's warehouse management, stock level management, all those are great tools, but the everything's run off of a PO or a SKU number, and there's no way to track an inbound container natively in Dynamics.
And before we talk about like, okay, hey, yeah, there's some missing things inside Dynamics that customers are looking for. What are like one, two, or three things that people are using Dynamics for if you're a cargo owner?
Well, it's PO management, and it's generally PO management. It's financial forecasting. So keeping that cash in that operating account is a challenge, not in the sense of like having enough money, but when you have shipments coming inbound, you need to know when you're getting invoiced. And we'll touch more on that later. But um and then supply chain, logistics, and sales and operations all being able to work out of the same source of truth is, right. That's the goal of Dynamics. How close companies come kind of varies, but that's the ideal, right? Is supply chain is ordering things, operations is either manufacturing or making sure that they're stocked, and then sales is getting them out to customers.
Got it. And then what do you tell? What is the conversations you're having with prospects in the context of like, okay, hey, this is your current state. They're interested in this visibility data to update the source of truth. They want to have it inside
Mhm.
Dynamics, right? What will that do for them?
So, like I said, that source of truth is important, but right now the current state is important to understand, which is that there's normally one or multiple spreadsheets floating around that are parallel to their source of truth. So, it's the same thing when you and I are talking, and if somebody has a separate pipeline that they're managing in Excel or a separate lead list they're managing in Excel, is the work getting done? Absolutely. Is that the visibility you need as a CEO? Absolutely not. You need to understand what your business is doing underneath you. And so when you scale this up, that's really the problem. Things get missed, things happen. So the first thing is understanding when things are coming in, every player being on the same team. The second is knocking down that detention and demurrage bill. I mean, and there's two pieces to that. The first is, hey, we just need to make sure we're not missing containers, that our logistics partner companies are doing their jobs. And the second is that accounts payable actually knows whether or not to pay this invoice. And then from there, we get into properly forecasting operating capital, tying POs to containers, how much inventory do we have on the water, and then being able to make bigger strategic data informed decisions. Are our supply chains at risk? How are our vendors shipping? How do we select vendors? These are all of the insights that having that first and middle mile transit time in your ERP allows.
So let me see if I understand this correctly. What might be happening? So you're saying, okay, hey, cargo owner imports a bunch of apparel, or let's take any commodity. They got their POs in Dynamics, so right, like they know what they have ordered, who the supplier is. They might even go and put the cargo ready dates for their POs, and then they're wondering, in their email, they're probably getting a bunch of bill of ladings or container documents from their freight forwarder, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then they might be like, okay, hey, I can't really track this in Dynamics, so I'm going to have a spreadsheet where I'm going to start putting like container numbers, bill of lading numbers, origin, destination, maybe key milestones departed, ETA, arrival, and then I'm going as like from just to manage. If I want to figure out like who I need to pay when or when my goods are coming, I'm kind of like going into the spreadsheet. I take updating it manually, right? Then I
Mm-hmm.
might go back in Dynamics and might have a couple of fields that it's arrived or it needs to be paid, right? Is that am I kind of
Yeah,
understanding
yeah,
this?
exactly. And the other thing is we spend a lot of time talking to logistics companies who have a very good idea of what structured container data is. Master bill of lading, an arrival data, this or that or the other. For a lot of companies, especially if you're importing things from, smaller textile manufacturers, smaller artisan producers in Europe, these guys just aren't logisticians. They're just like, okay, it's in the container, here's a number, bye. So even just getting a standardized payload or a standardized piece of data around how the container is going to move can be a challenge depending on what your sourcing and supply chain looks like.
Right, right. So, I mean, I think your sales example was good. Like, you might be doing like lead list building and spreadsheet once in a while, but in this case, things are changing daily, right? Like, this is actually a daily workflow for many people in the logistics team, in logistics team at a cargo owner, and then even their accounts, their finance team is also managing part of the workflow daily, which is dependent on the container milestones. So that sucks, right?
Oh
Like,
yeah.
I feel kind of their pain that they have to use multiple tools and they're kind of babysitting both tools
Oh
at the
yeah. Well, I was gonna say the other thing is like what your Incoterms are versus what your like when you have to pay your forwarder and your carrier versus when you have to pay your supplier is also two completely different. Uh,
So what is this? What's a new, hey, think about like transforming this experience for these operators, for these finance teams, for the management team at this cargo owner. Um, they all we obviously they all want everybody wants to do less work and have more visibility and maybe even some automated actions. But before we talk about automated actions, like what is your kind of advice to and solution finding for these cargo owners that you're talking to? Like, what is this new world that can look like with Terminal 49 and in Dynamics?
I think the first thing I always tell people is let's get accurate ETAs in your system. Let's solve the black box of getting those containers off of the dock. And if you do inland rail moves, obviously we cover that. But right now there's when is it hit US shores? Because obviously you need to do your customs, and that's where your risk of fees is probably second highest. Your first highest risk of just unnecessary cash outlay is visibility into the black box of terminals and rail. And then from there, the big thing for me is like let the ERP do the heavy lifting of tying POs to containers. You know what you've ordered, you know what it costs, you know where it's going. You have all of that information, but you want to track that further out. That helps with risk, that helps with, I mean, even just next quarter's revenue, right? If you know your cash turnover, or if you know your time to turn over goods is 120 days and you're still on the water, we're recording this on February 26th. So if your box is still on the water, you know now that realistically anything still on the water today with 120-day cash turnover is not going to be revenue until quarter 3. Like, to me, that is a valuable insight. So you, especially if you're doing, you know, if you've got $1 million a week in revenue coming in, right? Understanding where that is going to land in your forecasting is important.
So you're saying like, okay, hey, a container, of course, has a lot of different milestones and events, but starting simple with just ETAs and arrivals, maybe even like delivered or gate out, right?
Mm-hmm.
At the inlet could provide tremendous value, right? And I mean, as a Microsoft Dynamics customer, I might be like wondering, okay, hey, I don't know how to integrate this. What's the best way to do that? How long is it going to take? How much is it going to cost? And Microsoft is not going to help me do this. If I go to a Microsoft solutions provider, they're going to quote me tens of thousands of dollars to do something simple. How do you overcome these questions and concerns that a customer might have?
I think the biggest thing is just understanding the lay of the land for their own technical footprint. I mean, that's where I always start. The nice thing is that because if you're talking to somebody with Microsoft Dynamics, that means somewhere they have an Azure or a SQL product, or a Microsoft MySQL product. And at that point, we can just push tables of data into their environment or into their architecture. And what I like telling my prospects and customers when we're helping architect these solutions is let us get it into one database and let everybody look at that. Don't build an API connection to, even though it's primarily going to the ERP, don't make us build, or don't make yourself build API to Power BI and accounting and ERP and sales CRM, and no need. Put it in one database, have everybody look at it. It'll all update at the same time. And that's a pretty nominal cost for that update. If you decide later on that you want to get get a faster or fancier integration, or you want to start doing your own data science with our API, like, then by all means build it. But I always say start with a sync.
And we can do that in like a couple minutes, right?
Yeah, I mean
We
it's a
turn
call
on,
with,
yeah,
yeah.
cool. Well, that sounds pretty exciting. Anything else that you want to share about, how this digital transformation in the context of like Microsoft Dynamics 365 customers or Microsoft supply chain customers?
I think the thing that I think about is, I'll just very loosely quote a quote here. I've saved, you know 5-10 hours a week because the supply chain team and the logistics team are not both manually tracking these. Finance knows when to stock the cash in the account because they owed the remaining 80% of an import when the ship arrived at harbor, not even when it discharged. Accounts payable, we're knocking down a 6-digit demurrage bill. Accounts payable knows when to, or finance knows to keep when to keep the account stocked. Accounts payable knows whether or not to pay a demurrage invoice, and sales can use updated ETAs to communicate with their customers. And he said, all of this for $5 a container is like, you can't beat it. It's one thing, it solves a problem across every division. And then at the end of the day, the business analytics guys can go back, pull it into Power BI, and make vendor decisions based on data and who's consistent and who's delivering on. To me, if you're doing between a few hundred and a few thousand containers a year as an importer and you don't have some kind of plan to do this, you can be on Terminal 49. Like, if you don't have a plan to actually tie all of those operations together in your business, this is it's something you should really think about because it's costing you more than you think it is.
All right. That's a good place to stop. Well, thanks, Tom. Thanks for your insights.
Absolutely. It was great to be here.
All righty. Bye.